Okay, so I was reading an article on the BBC Sport website yesterday about the misbehaviour of Danny Brough and does Rugby League have an issue with drink and drugs? And they were trying to downplay the issue by saying, but because like most of them are on like only average of £50,000 a year in the UK or less than 100,000 Australian dollars in the NRL, and they're more down to earth and more closer to the fan base that they are a sport that represents. And I'm not denying that the majority of the players come from the local communities in which they play, their local clubs. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that it just could be better. But I look at a series of incidents over the last 5-10 years, and I'm looking at historical facts and things. And the Danny Brough thing is nothing new, in any sport. But to say that there isn't an issue, which when there is, in my eyes, there's too many high profile incidents to be classed as isolated. So you've had Zach Hardacre. Okay. You had Rangi Chase and another player whose name I actually forget still, and it really bugs me, in the same game playing for opposition sides, also failing a drugs test for cocaine. You've had Blake Ferguson and Josh Dugan when New South Wales were playing Queensland in the State of Origin this year. Asked their coach for permission to visit a friend near their training camp, and the coach said, "Yeah, no problem." Turns out a week after, it turned out they'd been out on the WAS, on the drink, and they'd lost the game. So yeah, that made the coaching staff look a little bit like, and that's not their first time. Sean Kenny-Dow getting caught with cocaine in the NRL when he was out in a nightclub in Sydney. Kevin Proctor and Jesse Bromwich getting caught doing cocaine in a nightclub in the summer. There's a trend here. I'm not saying all the players are doing it, but there seems to be a trend. And the ones getting caught are not lesser players. They actually are high profile for their clubs or for their country or for the league they're in. So it's interesting because the players that I've mentioned, if you do follow follow Rugby League, either in the NRL or over here, and the incidents that I mentioned, these are high profile players. There's been other instances of players hanging out with known criminals. There's been instances of players placing bets. Little things, but they can be taken out of context. But the players I mentioned, and this is in the last couple of years, and the Danny Brough thing really sums up what I'm saying. National captain James Tedesco in the Italian squad getting in a punch up with a teammate in a bar after the USA game just before, allegedly, get alcohol involved. This is all recent times, and these are all high profile players. So when the BBC started to downplay the issue of substance abuse, and I use substance abuse and cover gambling addiction in there as well. When the BBC was like, no, it's not a problem, it's only isolated incidents, the majority of players, I'm not just denying the majority of players are decent, hard-working, local lads playing for their local clubs. No doubt. But at the same time, you cannot downplay that the amount of incidents, albeit small in some people's eyes, there's a lot of them. And this is in one sport. I could go across sport. I could go into multiples. And to say there isn't problems is downplaying it. Because I looked at the interview that was given after Zach Hardacre was caught by the Leeds Rhinos coach. And I mentioned that in previous videos. And how he basically was like, don't mess around with drugs. Oh yeah, it's easy to say that, but when you tell a kid not to do something, you're going to do it. Just to spite your face. And the way it's been dealt with, and the way whenever there's these kind of incidents, they're like, it's not widespread, and they just talk like corporate instead of being corporate and droids. They just talk with how you feel about the situation. And a lot of coaches and a lot of team owners and a lot of sponsors and a lot of officials, they seem to not really just go, right, we're not going to follow the corporate line, we're going to talk about what we feel and what we see. They keep downplaying it. So the only way to confront an issue is not to downplay an issue. The only way to confront a problem is to educate and be open. And the amount of instances I mentioned with drink and drugs involved, there's an issue. There's a culture issue. It has to be. It has to be. It's not. And these are players who are not playing all at the same club. These are all over the world. All over the world. That has to come down to a culture issue within the sport, because they're playing at different clubs, playing for different national sides, playing for different representative football sides. These are not all at, say, using an example of the peptide scandal at Cronulla, they're not all at Cronulla. They are at a variety of clubs. Matt Moylan was dropped this season for a curfew breach when he was playing for Penrith. Over a season, won't get reported until after. It gets reported, after the event. But I'm not saying that the issue is widespread, but there is a significant minority of players who have problems with alcohol and drugs. Ben Barber, there you go. Cronulla win the grand final last year. He's found to have a large amount of cocaine in his bloodstream. About a test. Can't play league for 2 years, but he can play union. Don't understand the works of that, but Ben Barber, prime example. Costs the team a major sponsor. Going forward to the year just gone. And then, when the cocaine scandal broke with Sean Keane-Dale and Kevin Proctor and Jesse Bromwich, the chairman of Cronulla got caught with cocaine in his pocket? Yeah, there's a little bit more of an issue than people are willing to admit. But I mean, we could discuss all the positives, and there are loads. This tournament has been brilliant for try scoring and the skill set. Show my players. But when you're talking about substance abuse, I've mentioned it in multiple videos, and people just don't seem to want to engage with it until someone gets caught out. Well, loads of players have been caught out. Some have got lengthy bans, such as Zach Hardacre, Randy Chase and Ben Barber, and others got caught out outside of testing, so they get bans within the club or in the international environment, and given a talking to that way. So, interesting. But it's the examples I've given. There are more examples in the NRL than the Super League. And all the players that I mentioned, apart from Danny Brough, have played in the NRL at some point. So, there's kind of a correlation here. Bigger money, bigger misbehaviour. Possibly, I don't know. I know that the NRL players are, on average, paid more than the Super League. They are paid more. Does that have something to do with it? Possibly. But on the same token, Zach Hardacre committed his offences in the Super League. Randy Chase committed his offences in the Super League. Danny Brough, even though he's on international duty, Super League player. So I'm not going to say that if you play in the NRL you're going to misbehave, because Sam Burgess doesn't misbehave. George and Tom don't misbehave. Burgess twins. There are loads of English players in the NRL who behave admirably, professionally, and are cult heroes at their clubs. And then there are players over here that don't. A lot of this is unreported as well, may I add. So we don't get the full picture after every round of games or every weekend or every off season. Because now that it's in the off season, testing is just hit and miss. If you're not on the international World Cup squad, you're not going to get tested because you're not competing necessarily. So play could be behaved for 4 months. Sit really. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. I know I've just picked on this because of the article I read, and how they mentioned Danny Brough and his antics, and they are bad. To be so drunk you can't get on a flight is pretty embarrassing. The fact he's apologised, I'm very sorry, is irrelevant. He was the national captain. He should have been a leader of that group, regardless of how they're performing. He should still represent his country with pride. He's let them down. There were two other players involved in the kerfuffle. James Tedesco for Italy, vice captain, should have behaved better. Big money player as well, let his side down. So, yeah, off the field stuff like that doesn't show the good sport in a good light, and BBC are downplaying it because they're not confronting the problem that both incidents had alcohol involved. The other instance involving recreational drug use, there needs to be things in place, and a league transparency, league-wide, Super League, NRL, open channels for which players can go if they have concerns or are actually starting to use and are concerned and can feel comfortable and safe to do so. And rather than, I don't know, punishing possibly, but then it comes back to the local authorities. If you've gone and said, look, I've got a problem with gambling, alcohol, drugs, I want help, why punish them? They're wanting to seek help, why punish them? That's going to put people off seeking help. And at the same time, there are holes in the regulation when it comes to dope testing. Either you have zero tolerance, or there is this help policy. The leagues are stuck in somewhere in between. But this has come out of a World Cup, and this has come out of a season. A lot of players in the last 2 years have fallen about because of this. Anyway, I know it's been a bit of an interesting talking point. And, we can discuss this at length, but I'm not going to dwell on the subject. I've mentioned it mostly with the Zach Hardacre videos. There has to be more players misbehaving in such a way, and I've been proven right. I'm not saying all players are doing it, but there is a culture issue. And as someone who's a fan of the sport, the culture needs to change quite significantly. Players breaching curfew, players having issues with prescription medication. Kieran Foran, he's another example of a player who's had he's got depression. He's admitted it. And he has an issue with prescription medication and alcohol. He's admitted that. The fact that he tried to take his own life is unfortunate in itself. That was a couple of years ago when he was at Parramatta. So, there you go. No system's foolproof. But more needs to be definitely done in helping people, players, with issues such as their mental health, or if they're worried about a teammate, or if they are struggling with possibly drinking that one pint too many. There needs to be something in place so they go, right, I want to help myself. Because if you don't, you end up with a Paul Gascoigne. I'm mentioning, if you are, because I have some Australian viewers on this channel, if you don't know who Paul Gascoigne is, Gaza, eccentric soccer player, football player, has a big problem with alcohol and drugs. He's an ex-player now. He's basically completely lost it, and he'll probably will die soon. So if people don't know who Paul Gascoigne is, if you're from Australia or America, check him out. Type his name in, look at his controversies, and you'll be like, wow. Type him in on YouTube, type him in on the internet, find the articles. It's well known in the UK, and it's a sad story of what happens when you don't help people. That's basically what I can say to people who are not from the UK who are watching this. If you're from the UK watching this, you know who Gaza is. It's a well-known thing that his life has been quite interesting, and that's the risks on these sportsmen face. If their mental health, or they have an issue with alcohol, drugs, or gambling goes unchecked, they end up like Clark Carlisle, Paul Gascoigne, George Best. I'm naming English football players, and then players I'm naming, if you're outside of England, you probably won't have heard of necessarily. But there you go. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Please place your comments below. And if you have any ideas for future videos on topics that are going on in sport right now and issues that are going on in sport, please post them.